Welcome to State of the Offense, the New Orleans Saints source for fantasy football information. Welcome to State of the Offense, your fantasy football source for my favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Last year, the Saints finished 19th in total offense, 16th in passing, 19th in rushing, and 22nd in scoring, which earned them a 7-10 record and no playoffs. In the skill positions, the team brings back Jameis Winston, Alvin Kamara, Chris Olave, and Juwan Johnson as the top statistical contributors from last year. But the big news centers around the signing of quarterback Derek Carr from the Raiders. Other newcomers on offense include Jamal Williams, who was signed from Detroit, former LSU Tiger tight end Foster Moreau from the Raiders, and the Saints drafted running back Kendre Miller from TCU in the third round. Most fantasy football shows will only mention skilled players, but at State of the Offense, we cover the whole offense. We start in the trenches by analyzing the condition of the offensive line first. On the offensive line, the Saints will bring back 9 of 11 offensive linemen who took snaps last year, including the 5 primary starters from 2022. The Saints also signed 2 free agent offensive linemen and drafted an offensive lineman in the 4th round. ESPN currently lists 2021 first-round pick Trevor Penning as the starting left tackle on the depth chart. Penning saw only 124 snaps spread out over 5 games as a rookie due to a foot injury. 58 of the snaps came in the final game of the season. Penning graded at a 72 with a 22.4% snap share. A 72 grade would rate Penning as the projected number 31 left tackle in the NFL. Last year's starter James Hurst is back with the team, and he's listed as the backup to Penning. Hurst graded at a 74 in 16 games played. Hurst had a 92.2% snap share. Hurst's 74 grade would place him in the 28 to 29 range of starting left tackles. He is a free agent after the season. This position has been a relative weakness since Terron Armstead started getting hurt a couple years ago. Penning is a phenomenal athlete, and he's a nasty streak similar to former Saints tackle Kyle Turley. Penning's development as a pass blocker is possibly the most important key on the offense outside of the quarterback position. Andrus Peat is back for his 9th season as a Saint at the left guard position. The former first-round draft pick battled through injuries to see action in 11 games with only a 57.9% snap share. Peat graded at a 74, which puts him in the 14 to 16 range of starting left guards in the league. Calvin Throckmorton is listed as the backup. Throckmorton is entering his 3rd season with the Saints. He played about half the snaps as he did as a rookie, but still graded at a 67, which is a backup level grade for both years. Throckmorton played in 10 games and had a 46.6% snap share. Both Peat and Throckmorton are free agents next spring. Erik McCoy is back for his 5th year at the center position. McCoy played in 13 games last year with a 79 grade. His 79 was a drop from his 2020 and his 2021 performances, where he graded at an 81 both years. Last year, McCoy's 79 tied him for the 8th best center in the NFL with Baltimore's Tyler Linderbaum. McCoy is under contract through 2027. The Saints brought in Billy Price from Arizona, who played in 11 games for the Cardinals. Price graded at a 68, but he's a former first-round draft pick who has starting experience in the league. 2020 first rounder Cesar Ruiz is back for his 4th year with the black and gold at right guard. Ruiz did not have his 5th year option picked up by the team, so this is a big year for Ruiz. Ruiz graded at a 75 for the 2nd year in a row across 14 games played. The Saints moved up in the draft to select his backup Nick Saldiveri from Old Dominion in the 4th round. Right tackle Ryan Ramczyk is back for his 7th season on the team. He is a 3-time All-Pro who played at a high level again in 2022 with an 87 grade. Ramczyk played in 16 games last year, and he is under contract through 2026. The Saints' offensive line has always been a franchise priority in the Mickey Loomis era. 4 of the starters were first-rounders, and the other was a second-rounder in a year when the Saints didn't have a first. For the most part, Ryan Ramczyk is the only player who I really trust along the offensive line to be outstanding. The Saints had the most injuries along the offensive line out of any team in the NFL last year. 9 players had over 100 snaps along the offensive line for the Saints. You cannot establish any kind of consistency on an offense with that much shuffling going along on the offensive line. You would hope that the law of averages balances out next year where this group is healthier, but the Saints always seem to have key players miss time in this unit. Year 3 of the post-Drew Brees era is here, and the Saints are going into the season with another quarterback in Derek Carr, who's with the Raiders for 9 up and down years. But there's a fair amount of pressure on Dennis Allen for Derek Carr to perform as a bona fide franchise quarterback. I have actually rooted for Carr from afar, but the Raiders never provided him with the consistency or the structure that the Saints can provide him. Drew Brees defended Carr when he was asked about the Raiders' situation for Carr, so I really want this to work. The best news for Carr is that his 4 best years were in John Gruden's offense, which is similar to the Sean Payton offense. Carr just didn't seem to fit in the Josh McDaniels system last year. His completion percentage, yards per attempt, and quarterback rating in 2022 all dropped sharply. If we throw that out, just as a frame of reference, I will compare Derek Carr's peak Raiders numbers under John Gruden versus what Drew Brees did his last 4 years with the Saints when he was getting hurt and starting to slow down. Completion percentage, Brees 72.8, Carr 68.7. Yards per attempt, 7.9 for Brees, 7.7 for Carr. Touchdown passes, Brees 106, Carr 90. Interceptions, Brees 23, Carr 41. I don't mean to bust y'all bubble, but if any of y'all think that Carr can be a viable Drew Brees replacement, Derek Carr's 4 best years in Vegas were worse than Drew Brees' last 4 years when he was old. With that out the way, we can expect that 2023 should be a year where we get a pretty good version of Derek Carr. Last year in fantasy, Derek Carr was the quarterback 16 in points and the quarterback 22 in average points per game. Fantasy drafters are rating Carr as the quarterback 22 with the 164 average draft position. You can draft Derek Carr in the 14th round. While Derek Carr is no Drew Brees, you can't expect him to be better than Kenny Pickett, who is actually getting drafted a few spots above Carr. As a Saints fan, please do not overrate Carr if you want to win in fantasy football. Draft Joe Burrow early, then draft Carr at the end of the draft for Burrow's bye week if you want to pull the Louisiana quarterback special. Jameis Winston is back for year 4 in New Orleans as the backup. I know what Jameis is as a quarterback, and I love having a guy who knows the offense, who has talent, and wants to be a Saint as my backup. I love Chris Olave coming out of Ohio State, but damn, I didn't expect that he was going to be that good as a rookie. 72 catches on 119 targets, 1,042 yards receiving, and 4 touchdowns in 15 games played. The Saints have a true number 1 wide receiver on their roster with Chris Olave. He was the wide receiver 23 in points and the wide receiver 22 in points per game as a rookie. Olave is the 16th wide receiver drafted, and he's going at the 42 spot, which makes him a mid-4th round draft pick. He's not sneaking up on anyone in fantasy football. The wide receiver 2 on the depth chart is can't guard Mike. With Thomas renegotiating his deal and recruiting Derek Carr to New Orleans, it speaks a lot about Michael Thomas and the Saints locker room culture. We could have cut Mike like Arizona cut DeAndre Hopkins, but we didn't. He didn't leave. As a Saints fan, if we could get one nice season of Michael Thomas as a solid wide receiver 2 behind Chris Olave, I would be super excited for him and his comeback. When Mike played, he was the wide receiver 11 in fantasy points per game. In draft position, there are still a lot of people who believe in Michael Thomas. He is the wide receiver 36 going at pick 98 overall. I love Michael Thomas as much as the next guy, and I would love it if he's the wide receiver 36 in total points for the year. But how many times can you try and hope that this is the year he's going to be healthy? Don't be that guy if you want to win your league. Michael Thomas is not worth a 9th round pick. Derek Carr is getting drafted in the 14th round. I would draft Carr over Thomas. The guy that no one is drafting in fantasy is 2nd-year wide receiver Rashid Shaheed. As an undrafted rookie, Shaheed found his way onto the field, and he ended up as the wide receiver 66 in total fantasy points and wide receiver 62 in average points per game. The Saints have a lot of dudes who were high draft picks at wide receiver by other teams like Brian Edwards, James Washington, and Lynn Bowden. Edwards and Bowden both played with Carr in Las Vegas. The Saints also drafted a wide receiver in A.T. Perry this year from Wake Forest, so the competition should be a lot stiffer for Shaheed to get on the field this year as opposed to last year. He is currently listed as the wide receiver number 3 on the depth chart, so maybe he keeps his role. If he does, Shaheed will have some spike weeks because he is a proven deep threat. Shaheed had a 17.4 yards per catch average, and he caught 28 of the 34 balls thrown to him. If Shaheed is projected to start, especially if Michael Thomas is hurt again, steal Rashid Shaheed in the last round and enjoy the production. If you consider Taysom Hill tight end, which he really isn't, and the production of Juwan Johnson and the addition of Foster Moreau in free agency, this is as good a 3 tight end group as the Saints have had in a while. None of these guys will ever be mistaken for Jimmy Graham, but all 3 of these guys will have good fantasy games at times this year. Juwan Johnson has improved by leaps and bounds in his 3 seasons as a Saint. Johnson was the tight end 16 in points and the tight end 20 in points per game. He is the tight end 17 drafted at the 160 spot in the 14th round. Taysom Hill was the tight end 7 in points and the tight end 10 in points per game. Taysom is currently the tight end 25 getting drafted. Taysom Hill's usage in the offense last year was way too inconsistent. A 31% snap share for a guy as talented as Hill is too low. 96 carries for the year is not enough. 13 targets as a receiver is not enough. 19 passes thrown is not enough. The zone read with Taysom Hill and Alvin Kamara should have produced way more than it did. If the Saints just use him the right way and move Taysom Hill all over the field, the Saints would be much harder to stop on offense. Foster Moreau's story will be talked about all year because of the scariness of his cancer diagnosis. On the field, he was tight end 29 in points and the number 33 tight end in points per game. Moreau is not getting drafted at all in fantasy, but he is the best traditional two-way tight end on the Saints roster. He has played with Derek Carr his whole career. The Saints ran a lot of 2 tight end sets with Johnson and Troutman last year, so Moreau will slip it right in the Troutman slot and he will be on the field. While I love the talent of this trio and what they provide the Saints, I think that Derek Carr will probably have to pass for over 4,500 yards for any of the tight ends to really be relevant in fantasy football. Taysom Hill late is smart because he's basically a running back too that you get credit for at the tight end position. There will be plenty of backup running backs in the league who will score fewer fantasy points than Taysom will as a tight end. For over a year, the Alvin Kamara assault situation in Las Vegas has been getting publicized, and Saints fans have had to accept that Kamara will probably get suspended this season. Mark Ingram and the Saints are history now. The Saints decided to sign NFL touchdown rushing leader Jamal Williams from Detroit. In his 6th year in the league in Detroit, he posted career highs in carries, yards, and touchdowns. I expect Williams to be productive. Last year, he was the running back 11 in points and the running back 16 in points per game. Jamal is going as the 33rd running back drafted at pick 107 in the 9th round. This is stealing. Kamara is expected to be suspended for a minimum of 6 games. But with the Saints' luck with suspensions and Roger Goodell, I can see that number being much higher than 6 games. The Saints also drafted running back Kendre Miller from TCU in the 3rd round. He tore his MCL in the college playoffs, but he's expected to be ready for training camp. Miller is not a proven receiving back, so his skill set is completely different than Kamara's. He is quick and he reads the field well. If you're looking at a Miller and Williams split in the workload for the majority of the year, I would expect Williams to be on the field for 3rd down, for short yardage, and all passing downs, while I could see Miller getting about 8 to 10 touches a game, mainly on 1st and 2nd down. If we are looking at a Kamara-Williams tandem for the majority of the year, Williams and Kamara will probably rotate like Kamara and Ingram used to back when Ingram was producing. In fantasy, Kamara was the running back 15 in points and in points per game last year. Alvin is the running back 28 drafted at position 81 in the 7th round. The 7th round for Kamara in a year where he will be suspended at least 6 games is way too steep. Let someone else get Kamara if he's going to cost that much. I'm drafting Williams as much as I can in the 9th round price. Kendre Miller is the running back 54 in average draft position. He can be had in the 14th round, but his draft position will probably move up as draft time draws nearer. I would only draft Miller if he's off the injury report at draft time. I'm not going to draft Kamara at all. Productivity of the Saints in fantasy football is tied to how well Derek Carr acclimates to his environment in New Orleans. The offensive line has been underachieving and injury prone for years, to where this offense has been held back quite a bit by the offensive line. The Alvin Kamara suspension is the next big fantasy story. The safest bet in fantasy is Chris Olave, but I think that the 4th round price might be a little bit too high, but that's where he's going. I really like Jamal Williams' potential value this year in the 9th round. Because of his injury history, I simply don't trust Michael Thomas anymore. I really like Rashid Shaheed, Jawan Johnson, and Foster Moreau, but there will probably be too much target competition for any one of them to stick out. I would like to see more zone read with Taysom Hill and Jamal Williams on goal line and short yardage, but Carmichael will probably underutilize Hill again. Derek Carr will do better in fantasy than his draft position, but he should only be your quarterback 2 on your roster. The Saints have a veteran roster that will play smart and tough football. The injury report has been too long for far too long. If the Saints get good luck in the injury department, they can win the NFC South easily in 2023. If it is the same old deal with injuries, the Saints will probably struggle to win 8 or 9 games. Bryce Young and the other additions in Carolina make the Panthers the biggest competition for the Saints in the division. The Tampa defense will keep them in games. They don't have Brady anymore. Atlanta still needs a quarterback, but they will try to beat people with a lot of Bijan Robinson. The Atlanta defense is still a problem to keep the Falcons out of the mix. I expect the injury situation for the Saints to be okay, but not great. So I'll call an NFC South championship for the Saints with a 10-7 record with enough potential to win a playoff game in 2023. If you like today's coverage of the New Orleans Saints offense, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel.
Who that say gonna beat them Saints? Who that?